All right, so last week we created our robot arm and we rigged it with an FK rig. And this week what we want to do is take that FK rig and turn it into an IK rig so you guys can see the difference between the two and see which one you like better. So I loaded up my FK arm and I just want you guys to do the same. And once you have that loaded, we're actually going to work off of this same exact model and just kind of change up how we rigged everything. So first things first, we want to get rid of the constraints that we had made last week so that our arm really doesn't work anymore. So we can just kind of take it completely apart. So I'm going to go into my outliner, so into Windows, Outliner, and load up our outliner here. I'm going to hold down Shift and I'm going to click this plus sign that will blow everything out for us. And I just want to delete all of our parent constraints. So we should have 4 different parent constraints that we created last week. With the claw joint, the elbow joint, the shoulder joint, and the base. And I'm just going to delete those. All right, and once we have those deleted, what we want to do now is actually create joints, like real joints, on our model. So I'm going to close our outliner out. We don't need it right now. And now if I were to go into our rig, nothing works anymore. So we need to make it work again. So I'm going to go into my front view. And this could be different for you guys, but you want this view right here kind of looking straight on at your object. I'm then going to click 4 on my keyboard and it's going to load up our wireframe mode. Because when we create our joints, we want to be in wireframe mode so we can really see where we're placing them. I want to go up and I want to change myself from modeling to animation. Oh, sorry, to rigging actually. So first time we've gone into rigging. So you want to go into rigging. And when we are in rigging, we'll then be able to create the joints that we need to create that IK rig. All right, so if you go up to skeleton and create joints, or this might say joint tool depending on what version of Maya you're on. So you just want to click create joints. And it's not going to look like anything's really happening. But now if I were to select anywhere on my screen, you can see that joint is created. So I'm going to place my first joint right here on the edge of where our base was. Okay? And then I'm going to hold down Shift and I'm going to work my way across. We're going to create 4 different joints that are going to rig our arm. So our first one is going to be right inside of our shoulder. And then I'm going to go all the way over to where our elbow is. And in the middle of there, I'm going to click again. And then I'm going to go all the way down into our wrist or our claw. And I'm going to click in there as well. And you should hold Shift down this entire time so that everything works in straight lines. You don't want all different types of angles or anything like that for right now. Okay, so we have our 4 joints created. I'm just going to click Q, and that will get me out of that joint mode. And now I should have all 4 joints. And we have 1 here, 2, 3, and 4. So let's rename them so that we can easily work with them. So our first one here is our clavicle joint. So when I select it, it will look like everything is selected, but in reality, if you look at over in our channel box, it says joint 1. So you want to be on joint number 1, and we're just going to call that clavicle, if I can spell it right, underscore joint. All right, joint number 2, which is our second one here, we're going to name our shoulder joint. So shoulder underscore joint. Our third one is our elbow joint. So let's rename that. And our fourth one down on the bottom is our wrist joint. So we have our 4 joints created and they're in line exactly where we want them. So now we can start to work with them and really get them moving so they can start to control our arm. So I want to go up to skeleton again. And rather than create joints this time, I'm going to go down and I'm going to do a create IK handle. And I'm going to click the little option box here. This might say IK handle tool on your Maya, depending on the version again. But you want the IK handle. So in the option box, it should look something like this. No, really no matter what version you're in. And you just want to make sure that your current solver is on rotate plane solver. It might say IKRP solver. That's the one you're looking for as well. You just don't want to be in the single chain solver. So go into rotate plane solver and leave the rest how it is, and you can close that out. And then you want to click from your shoulder joint to your wrist joint, and then it should create that IK handle. So if I click on my shoulder joint, and then I go down to my wrist joint and I select, you can see the IK handle 1 was just created between the two, okay? And that's what we want. So just click enter, you're good. You can click off of it and just kind of leave it there for right now. We'll get back to it. So the next thing that we want to do is we need to create a pole vector, okay? So we want to go, and first we need to create kind of the handle that the pole vector will kind of control. So this is going to be controlling our elbow, and when we move our arm around, this pole vector and this control that we're going to make will kind of let us rotate our elbow joint. So same as we've done with any other controls in create, NURBS primitives, and down to circle. And this time we're going to do a little bit different than we've done before. So I'm going to rotate it so that I can see it. So for me, it's my rotate X value. I'm going to put it at 90. And then I want to go into the inputs. So over on the right in my channel box, down on the bottom, it says inputs. And in here, we're gonna work with this just a little bit, which is something we haven't done on our other rigs. So down where the degrees are, right now mine is set at cubic. I just want to select that and click linear. And you'll see now that it actually kind of changes what our control looks like. And right now we have 8 sections. So I'm going to change that down to 3 sections. And what that'll do is create a triangle that we can use as our pole vector. So I'm going to scale that down, and then I'm just going to move that kind of right over on top of where our elbow joint is. Just kind of off to the side, maybe a little bit. So right about there looks good. There's no right or wrong way to do that. And then just get it the size that you want. And then when you have that selected, we just want to rename that pole vector. Okay, so far we have taken our old model. We've gotten rid of those parent constraints that we used before. We've created 4 different joints: our clavicle joint, our shoulder joint, our elbow joint, and our wrist joint. We then created an IK handle that went between our shoulder joint and our wrist joint. And then we created our pole vector, which will end up working that elbow around for us. So I want to select our IK handle here. And then I want to, I actually want to select our pole vector first. We still should have had it selected. So select our pole vector. And then I want to shift select our IK handle. And then go up to constrain and pole vector. So we haven't used this constraint yet. So down on the bottom, it's pole vector. Just use that. You'll see things kind of move around a little bit on here. That's perfectly fine. And then just leave it as it is. Okay, so now we have that selected. So we just did that. So let me just go back so you can see that one more time. So we selected our pole vector. We shift select our IK handle. Constrain, pole vector. Alright, I just want to make sure that everything looks good with it. So it should show it right here like that. Alright. And then I want to go up to edit. And I want to delete by type our history. And then I want to freeze our transformations. So a couple different steps that we just did. You should have created your pole vector. You should have shift selected your pole vector and then your IK handle and done a constrain pole vector. And then you could have already had everything selected. You want to go up, freeze those transformations, and then delete by type our history. And then from there, we should be okay. So save your files. Make sure you guys are saving throughout so that if anything goes wrong, you kind of have that backup. Because things are getting a little more technical now than we have done on some of our previous rigs. All right, so things right now are actually working pretty well if we were to just move our rig around, but we're not going to do that yet. So what I want to do first is delete some of our controls that we had actually created from our previous rig, because we're not going to need them anymore. We're not going to use those FK controls. So I want to select all of our controls first. So if I select our base control and then just kind of shift select everything, I want to unparent. So by just clicking Shift P, it'll actually unparent all of those for us. And now if we select them all, you'll see that they don't go with one another, because we want to delete some of them, but if we delete them and they're parented, it can cause other issues. So we're going to delete two different controls. We're going to delete our elbow control, so select it and delete it. And our shoulder control, just select that and delete it. We don't need those anymore because all that we're going to use to move around is going to be our claw control, and that will actually control the entire arm. And then the pull vector that we created will move the elbow and kind of line up the elbow. So just with these two controls, we're going to be able to do everything that we were doing before, and have a little more flexibility with it. So now we want to connect our claw control to our IK handle. So if I select my claw control and then I shift select our IK handle, I want to just go up to constrain, and we're going to do a point constraint. Make sure that your maintain offset is on. So in the option box, go into maintain offset, make sure it's on, and just click add. So that should now be good. The other thing that we need to do is on our previous rig that we had done, I had turned off my translate controls on my claw control. So we weren't able to translate our claw because it's not something that would ever really move around without its help. And how we had done our FK rig, it wasn't something that should be moving in kind of those translate values. But now that we're doing the IK rig, we actually do want to have that freedom to move this around with our translate values. So we need to get those back. For me, I had gone in and I hid them and I locked them. So we just need to get them again. So if I go into over on the right, if I just select my claw control in edit, you can load up channel control right there. And it will load up our channel control box here. And what we need to do is just find the translate control. So it's in alphabetical order. Just go down to the bottom and you'll see translate X, Y, and Z. And you just want to move them over to our keyable area again. So if I move them to the left, now they should be showing back up. Mine are still locked, as you can see. So just select them, right click, and unlock the selected. Now they should show back up and we should have full control over them, so that we can move them around and key them and animate with them. All right. So the next thing that we want to do is just connect our shoulder control. So we want to select our arm main control, which is the giant one, kind of the one that had been controlling our base before. And then we want to shift select our clavicle joint, which was our first joint that we created. I want to go to constrain, parent option box, make sure that maintain offset is on, and just click add. Okay, if we've done that, then we should be good. So now we want to connect our geometry. If I were to move my controls around right now, you can see that things are actually working pretty well. But it's not moving any of my geometry yet. And that's because we haven't connected it. So in our previous rig, when we did our FK, we hid our geometry. Or we didn't hide it, but we made it so that we couldn't select it. So in our display layers over on the bottom, in these animation layers, I just want to turn off the reference that we had set on. So over on the right, you see the R. Just click that, and now your geometry should turn blue. Mine turns blue again, but it should turn a different color. And if you're up in the in your view, you should be able to select it again. So now I want to select our claw control, and then I want to shift select our claw joint. And when I say the claw joint, that's actually the geometry, not the joint that we just created. We kind of have both of them named claw joint at this point, which can get a little confusing, but it's because we reuse that old rig. So just select your claw control and then the actual geometry of the claw, and it should select the fingers. And then I want to go to constrain and parent. All right. So now we want to select our elbow joint. And then shift select arm 2, which is this one down here, kind of the forearm. Constrain, parent. And then I want to select our shoulder joint. And for that, I mean the actual joint. And then shift select arm 1. Constrain, parent. And then last, we want to select our clavicle joint. And then select our base. Shift select the base. Constrain, parent. So our rig should be working pretty well now. And before we kind of clean things up, let's just double check and make sure that everything's working. So I'm going to go into my perspective view, and I'm going to click 5 so that I can see my geometry again. And I'm going to select my claw control. And now if I move it around, my arm should move with it, which looks like it's working pretty well for us. So the only other thing you want to look at with that is if your pole vector works. So when you move your pole vector, it should move your elbow. So both of those seem to be working well. So then you should look at your arm main control, and you should make sure that's still working. So you'll notice a difference in that before with our rig, if I were to move my claw control, it wouldn't control anything else on the rig. It would only control this one joint on the bottom. Now we have kind of max control over everything with just a couple of joints. And our arm main control actually rotates, more than just the base that we had set up. So the rig itself is looking correct, and it's looking pretty good. So the only other thing that we want to do is just organize it a little bit and clean things up. We want to load up our outliner. And in our outliner, we just want to clean up everything that we had created today so that our outliner is nice, and if we were to reference this into an animation scene, everything works properly. So if you hold down shift and click the little plus sign next to the robot arm, this is everything that we had created last week. And this stuff on the bottom, these are our new items. So we have our clavicle joint, and if you blow that out, you can see the other joints that we have in there. And then we have our IK handle and some of that, and then our pole vector and some of our little controls because we had moved some of our stuff around. So the first thing we're going to do is create a new group for our joint. So if I select my clavicle joint and I do a Command G, I'm going to group that. And I'm going to create a new group, and I'm going to name that joints. Okay? So then with that joints group selected, I'm going to select my robot arm as well. So I'm going to Command select my robot arm. And I'm just going to click P. And what that's going to do is just kind of move it inside of it. It's just going to parent it in there. So that looks good, and that's kind of what we want. And now that's inside of our giant robot arm group. So now we want to select all of our controls, which we have a couple of them left. So we have our claw control, our arm main control, and our pole vector. And I'm going to put them into my controls group. So we've already had the controls group from our previous rig, but right now it's emptied out. So if you just select these 3 items, and then select the controls group and click P, it'll drop them right inside of there. And then you just want to select the IK handle, Command G, and we can name that handles. And then now we have a group for our handles, and you have that selected. Select your robot arm group and click P so that it just kind of falls inside. So now if we were to kind of minimize some of what's inside of our robot arm, if we open it up, we have our geometry, our controls, our joints, and our handles. And everything is clean and organized, which is exactly what we're looking for. So the only other thing that we're going to do before we're done with our rigging is just set up a few new display layers so that we can hide some of the stuff that we don't really need to see. We just need it to work in the background. So I want to reset my geometry layer to reference because I don't want to be able to select my geometry. But as you can see right now, we can select our joints and our IK handle, and we don't want any of that. The only thing we want to be able to select is our controls, which is our claw control, our pole vector, and our arm main control. That is the only thing we should be animating on, the only thing that I want you guys to be able to select. So in our outliner, which I closed, so open that back up, and just open up your robot arm. I want you to select your joints group, and then I want to have you just create a new display layer. So over on the bottom right, the same one that we normally use, just that far right one with the white base and kind of that blue ball on it. Just click that. It says create a new layer and assign selected objects. We're going to rename that joints layer and click save. And then I'm going to turn that to reference. So now I can't select it. And then I want to do the same exact thing for my handles. So select my handles group in my outliner, create a new layer and assign the selected objects, handles layer, and save. Turn the reference, and I'm going to turn both of those off too. So I'm going to keep my geometry on, but I'm going to turn off my handles layer and my joints layer. We don't need to be able to see them for any reason at all. So just turn them off so you don't accidentally select anything. So our rig should be complete at this point. So just test it out one more time. Make sure you guys are saving. But select your claw control, move it around a little bit. It should move the rest of your arm. It should rotate your claw still, and everything should be good. Your pole vector, if you move it around, your elbow should follow. And then your arm main control should control your base, and you should be able to rotate that around. And really the upper part of the arm and the elbow will probably follow. Arm number 2, arm 2 might get in there as well. Probably won't really touch the wrist control. But this should give you full movement on your arm, and it will let you animate your arm a little bit easier because now I can just pull this down and all of a sudden we have everything set up. Whereas before, if we wanted to kind of drop our arm down like this, we would have needed to move 3 or 4 different controls. So by just moving these couple controls, we have that same freedom and that same movement, and it's just a little easier to work with. So there's benefits of an IK rig, there's benefits of an FK rig. I want you guys to be comfortable working with either one. I want you to get used to working with both of them so that you can make the decision on which one you like better. Because most rigs that you guys will work with will have an option to kind of switch between the two. So you just want to get comfortable with both. You want to get a feel for working with both of them. So have some fun with this. Play around with it. Test it out with your animations. We're going to be doing an object throw and see how you like it.